Andy.
Hello, hello. That will be for the 338 course instead, and it's your NX 355.
And what are we working?
Is that case study we saw last time?
Okay. How can I help you with that?
I kind of have some of it typed out, but not fully everything right now. But yeah, uh, I got some of it written out.
Okay.
This is what I have right now. Yes, this is what I have right now. But
Not sure.
it's not showing up yet. You see it?
Oh, now.
I think what it is I'm not sure. I'm not answering. That's the rubric we saw last time. Uh, because for some parts I didn't really so-called do that parent like talking to the parent because I couldn't really interact with the parent because I don't get to see them and stuff. But this is what I got from those little questions I created. Um, that's where these most of this information in some ways came from, and also when I observed the kids those 3 times. Yeah. This is what I have so far about him and stuff. Um, yeah.
Okay. And you said you just wanted to make sure it meets the rubric requirement?
Yeah, because right now, and I'm not sure it's what does it seem like there's a page like limit of what because the reflection here, what I have here is those from that reflection part of the other assignment reflection. But yeah, so yes.
Okay. Yeah, let's take a look at the rubric.
Um okay, I'm not load. It's not loading right now. But it'll rubric. Okay, there we go. It's loading. It's still loading right now. I'm not sure what you see it. And the thing is still loaded, so it's kind of blurry. It might be blurry. But
Yeah, it's still a little blurry, but it hadn't popped up. Now it did. So
it done loading, but it's still blurry.
yeah, just give. Okay, cool. No, it's now it's For me, it was too blurry to read. Now it's not.
You can see it now?
Okay, so yeah, let's just go through these. Yeah, let's just go through these one by one, and we'll kind of do last time, talk about them, see if it meets it, and then if it meets all the requirements.
Yeah.
So first one, introduction. Candidate provides information, introduction to the case study, including child's age, is a pseudonym, highlights family and cultural and linguistic background, gender, mode, and setting of observation. How are you on that?
It seems like I don't really have. I have some of it, but not fully everything for the introduction part of it.
What are you missing?
What
are you missing then?
I do have the pseudonym, and I gave you the age, that birth date. I think I did so-called do those, but like this is what I have for that part right now for like so-called the introduction. Maybe the first these two-ish parts, maybe the two here too.
Could you share that Google Doc with me? So, sorry, Mandy, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, cool. Can you share that with me?
Yeah,
Can you
sure.
share that with me so we can look at it? Sorry. Hold up just a second. Can you share that with me, the document, so that I can look at both that and the rubric side by side?
Yeah, sure. Can you send me your email in the chat so I can copy over?
Yep, I put it in there.
Do this one. It is loading for the sharing part of that document.
No worries. Yeah, just let me know when you send.
You should be getting it soon.
Awesome. There it is. All right. So, yeah, if you just keep up the rubric like you already have it, and then I'll have this document right beside it. That it doesn't let. Okay, there we go. Okay, so what part of the introduction do you feel like you don't have?
I think what I am thinking is like, is it okay and is it like this enough for that part?
So that if it meets all those requirements, if it has all those things, then yeah, it's okay. So let's look at it. You said you have the pseudonym.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have the cultural and and linguistic background?
I think that's the part I don't. I think that's the part I don't have for that.
Okay, then I would highlight that or like make a note to include that.
Yeah,
And then
that's the
gender,
one I don't have.
right? Yeah, just add a note and make sure to include that. You talk about gender.
I kind of said his name, but I'm not sure is that okay enough. With those his and stuff. Yeah.
I would include a little bit more since it's on there.
But like, how would I do that? Like,
You could say something like he like I so you say his, so you could say something like he identifies as male, or like he uh like if he you know likes talks about like, oh, like uh I'm a boy and boys like to do this and girls, like maybe mention about how important gender is to him and his family, like how do his parents dress him, kind of stuff like that.
for the gender part.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be much. Like if all you say is he presents or identifies as male, then that's probably. And then what about mode and setting of the observation?
Um, I kind of did that later on for like the this part for this exercise. I observed him on 3 separate occasions at his daycare center, and I focused on his cognitive development skills.
Okay. Yeah, I would make sure that that's included in the introduction. And then I would maybe talk a little bit more about like what's this daycare center like? How many people are there when you're doing this observation? What are you doing? Are you just like, how much are you interacting with him? So maybe expanding more on the introduction would be helpful. And then just making sure when you're doing this, you're doing it based on the rubric, not just like what you think is important, but instead what the rubrics, like go through each one of these items and make sure you have. Does that make sense?
So for sure, the part right now maybe is the about mention about his gender part, kind of.
It sounds like you said you were missing the cultural and linguistic background, gender, and then to expand on mode and setting of observation. Anytime that you say like, oh, I kind of have that, then that means it's probably not enough. So if you're like, oh, I think I have that, then it's like, no, you should know that it's like, oh, I addressed this. Sound good?
Yes. Okay. Yes.
Did you make a note of those items?
Yeah, I got it. Yes.
Great, let's go to the purpose. Candidate clearly describes the purpose for conducting this case study. Let's just start there. Did you clearly describe the purpose for conducting this case study?
For the purpose. It seems like it's not very clear.
Okay, how could you clarify?
Because what I have mentioned during my presentation of this about the kid is that I had said like I saw some similarities in this kid, and that's why I had like the way he acts kind of like reminds me of my brothers. I did kind of say that here, like the behaviors and stuff.
Yeah, I see that.
But
Maybe expand a little about why him being in speech therapy is interesting to you, and why that also made you want to study him.
the speech therapy part.
Clarify the purpose.
The speech therapy part.
Yeah, because you said I just decided to observe Eric because he is receiving speech therapy, and his behaviors remind me of my younger brothers. I would say that sounds like your purpose, and I would maybe just expand a little bit on why speech therapy was interesting.
Okay.
And especially because it says focusing on the child's functioning in a specific domain.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like you would focus on like his speech.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I think that one, I'd say you're 90% there, just like adding a little bit more about the speech there, why the speech therapy was interesting to
I so for that therapy part. I kind of knew he had some sort of therapy, but I wasn't really clear until like I kind of talked to the therapist, asking what kind of therapist he is, and then she has
Yeah.
like she's a speech, and then I got the answers back from the questions that he is receiving speech, so he is a receiving speech therapy.
So yeah, did you get a note down to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, expand on the speech therapy part for the purpose.
Excellent. No, I think you'll have that. So then for observations, candidate clearly and adequately describes the observation tools and approaches, checklist, rating scale, and one other. Anecdotal notes, time sampling, event sampling, diary notes, audio, video, um, whatever interacted with the child. The types of data collected are described. Did you do that here?
For that part, I think that one is this part where I had Soko had those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay. Is that describing the observation tools?
Not really.
Okay, so since that's in here, I would make note to, talk about what tools you use. It says checklist, rating scales, and one other. So it sounds like you'll have to
Uh, for what I so-called mentioned in my presentation, I had said, um, I did, what did I do? I so-called like did the questions with both the teachers and parents, like the interview questions stuff, and then I had set the notes part like to that note, and then the notes with pictures and stuff for the other. But I'm not sure, does that note, that picture consider as same thing as the note before or not?
So this rubric section gives a few different examples: checklist, rating scales, anecdotal notes, time sampling, event sampling, diary notes, audio, video recording, interaction with caregiver. I would just pick 3 from there, making sure that you have checklist and rating scale included, and then one other. And I would pick. It sounds like you have audio or video recording or interaction with caregiver. Or whether candidate interacts with the child. So you would talk about the checklist you use, the rating scales you use, and then maybe your interaction with the child. Does that make sense?
Mm, okay, because what I have is kind of like, it seems like I have 2, not really 3, with what I have. With I for sure have those like questions I asked the parents to answer for sure.
What about rating scale?
It's so-called interview questions. To get like the background on the kid and stuff, and a bit more about the kid. I did interview questions, and then I
Guess what I'm asking? Sorry to interrupt. I'm asking what are you going to include that under? From that list on the rubric? Are you going to consider that a checklist, a rating scale, or something else?
because the question part is so-called is that question part is kind of one of those 2.
Which one?
It is one of these type of tools in some ways too.
Yeah, which one specific?
It's this tool. It's its own tool itself.
So from that list, it's not any of those. It's not a checklist. It's not a rating scale, anecdotal note, time sampling, event sampling, diary notes, audio, video recording. It's not any of those.
It's the thing itself. It's the so-called it's the interview questions itself.
So do you have a checklist or rating scale that you use?
what I did really was so-called questions and then taking notes of the kid. I don't really have three. I only have kind of like two from this.
Okay, and I would just include as much as you can about those. Let's see, data organization, analysis, and interpretation. Candidate specifies the approaches to data organization analysis that ensured useful information was extracted from the data and correct interpretations were made. Parent caregiver input informs the data analysis. Positive aspects of the child development and learning are highlighted. Where'd you cover that?
This part, in my thing, I think I kind of mentioned it in here. In the part after that five little bullet 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I think I mentioned it in that so-called my observation period to the yeah those parts before my notes part. Yeah.
And then did you collect any like data or anything like that?
Um, the data. Mm, the data part. I think that might be my notes then, because that's what I kind of really got and saw of the kid. It's and it's really what I is kind of similar to what the parent and the teacher. I'm at mainly kind of like what the teacher had responded about the kid and stuff. Um, my notes part is kind of with
Yeah, I
the
see that in my
teacher.
notes. You talk about your notes. That's good. I think what I would just add to these notes is you have a little bit about my thoughts are that I would recommend additional therapy for Eric. I would maybe more expand too on why you're including the data and what it means. So, for instance, it says when it was pointed to Eric that he put his finger in the wrong place, he was starting to cry. What does that mean? Does that mean that like why was he starting to cry? Does he have a hard time regulating his emotions? Was he feeling like a lot of pressure? Was he anxious? Was he frustrated? Kind of talk a little bit about what your notes mean and what that means for Eric. Does that make sense?
Um, so I have to explain more for this the what I have right here for in my notes.
Yeah, explain the notes. Explain what that means.
And this part seems like my the data part.
Yeah, I mean, I think notes could count as data. I mean, I think it would have been helpful to have a little bit more, especially if you could have had anything like the checklist or rating scale. But notes should count. I would say that includes interaction with the child, diary notes, it says, uh, anecdotal notes, these would be. So yeah, these are definitely data. And then so data analysis would be kind of examining the notes and what that means. And then also don't forget to include positive aspects of the child's development and learning. I see, and it's like, it's important to include what you have.
Mm-hmm.
I see you have a lot of more negative stuff, which is fine. It's true. But I would also try to include some more positive stuff.
Like what would really be positive from what you can see here? Can you?
I mean, that's up to you. None of this is really positive. So I would maybe think about how you interacted with Eric and what you could include that was more positive. None of this is really positive.
Okay. Try to have something positive in the data part.
Yeah. Like if you did good at something, if you interacted well with something.
Then would so-called he helping a classmate do with the activity be positive there then?
Yeah, helping a classmate with activity, that's absolutely fine.
Okay.
Shall we go to element 5?
Yeah, let me do. Yeah.
It shares assessment results with parents and or caregivers and clearly states how these results can inform interaction with the child. In order to foster positive learning that is developmentally appropriate in both age and child's function. Were you able to share the assessment results with parents and or caregivers?
That part I did write it in there, but I didn't really I think as I mentioned previously, I wasn't able at all to really interact with the parent.
Totally. And I'm not like trying to scare you or anything, but it is important when you have assignments like this to go through the rubric beforehand and make sure that you follow that.
Mm-hmm.
Because unfortunately, since you weren't able to talk to the parents, there's really not much we can do. You know, like you can talk about how you kind of did it with you would recommend additional therapy, but since this is kind of about what your conversation with the parents went like, it's kind of hard to do.
Because
So,
I couldn't I didn't I wasn't even really able to I I don't because I don't really get to I'm in another classroom when or like the pickup is by either the not always the mom and it's another relative that would be picking up the kid. So it's kind of like and then I'm working and then on the so like it's the interaction with even like the parent or like the aunt and the is to like give back what I saw and stuff. It's kind of hard in some ways. But what I saw from their like answers to my question is really what I saw in the classroom with what it's the same thing as what they wrote. So I do see kind of like that's another way of maybe like collaborating with the parent in some ways, but not really. But yeah, I did.
and this is just like for future reference for like the next time you have an assignment like this.
Mm-hmm.
If you are having trouble like meeting a requirement, like because you're busy or because like the schedules just don't work, make sure to communicate that with your professor because then they can kind of do accommodations or get something. But at this point in the process, it's kind of too late for that.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, like, hopefully it's not a big deal. You know, this isn't the full assignment.
Mm-hmm.
But it is important to make sure that you can do all this stuff that's required of the assignment. And if not, making sure to communicate that with the professor. For this one, you're just going to have to try to include as much information of what you would do to encourage positive learning that is developmentally appropriate. But since you weren't able to meet with the parents, it's kind of a bummer, but we can't do too much here. I would just make sure to talk about how the results can inform interaction with a child to foster positive learning. Does that make sense?
Mm. So like how would I do this part then?
That so the key words you're going to want to this isn't going to be one of those ones that you'll have to like research on your own, but the key words for you to look at for your textbook
Mm-hmm.
are going to be positive learning and developmentally appropriate. So look through your textbook, look online, and try to figure out how people foster positive learning that is developmentally appropriate. So I would maybe highlight that phrase and find a way to talk about that, because that's going to be your course specific. That's going to be something you guys kind of cover in your course. But I think that's the key phrase to research there is positive learning that is developmentally appropriate. So I'd maybe highlight that.
Okay.
And then find examples of that. Find in your textbook what it talks about that, and then think about, okay, how would I foster positive learning that is developmentally appropriate?
Okay.
Feel like you can do that?
Yeah, I think so.
Let's go to element 6. Candidate clearly describes specific activities to carry out with the child as a result of the case study. So that's going to be after the case study. What specific activities can you carry out with the child? Do you have an idea for that, or do you have that already included?
I think that one I don't have. The only thing I have right now is like that suggestion part.
Yeah. So that's going to be something I think that goes kind of off the positive learning that is developmentally appropriate. So as you research that, I would maybe be thinking about specific activities to carry out with the child. The activities target the child's areas of need and ease of use with parents, older siblings, and also engages the children's active learning to appropriate levels. Learning activities have to be attractive to the child. So basically, it has to be a fun activity that helps them learn. And since you're focusing on speech therapy, you might be thinking of activities that are related. Does that make sense?
So for this part is to try to find the activity.
When are you turning this in, Mandy?
I am trying to turn it in over the weekend, tomorrow, the latest.
Okay, cool. So you still have some time. And this is just like research stuff. So, it might take some time to do this research and different activities and kind of describe them. It sounds like to be honest, it sounds like you still have a good amount of work to do.
Okay,
But since you have till tomorrow and it's the weekend, maybe if you just put your nose to the grindstone and kind of make sure you have all these elements, I think it's totally cool. Yeah. And then, and I would really, really, really if you do anything, please write this off of the rubric, making sure that, just like we're doing here, you're going through the rubric and it's not, oh, did I maybe do that? It's you should be I 100% did that. And if you haven't 100% done it, then figure out how you can. So, if don't ever, when you're reading through a rubric on this, don't ever think oh, I can skip that. No, make sure you have it all in there. And if you need to have it in there, for example, the discussion with the parents, then talk about why, realize that maybe it's fine if you don't get 100, it's don't get 100, but you should try it. You should be striving to get all of these areas as much as possible. And it's also kind of helpful because you don't need anything that's not in these. You don't need anything that's not in the group. So you don't need to talk about you don't need to talk about you don't need to deeply describe everything about Eric's past or everything. And you don't, you don't here. But that just for example, you don't need to describe that. Really focus in on this rubric and what it tells you to do. And don't worry about anything besides what this tells you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And there's I think like, yeah, I think make sure that if there's any phrases in the rubric that you don't understand, I would first start with Google and just like Google and see what comes up. And then I would go to your textbook and see if they're in your textbook. Google's going to give you like the basic definition of like positive learning. You know, it's like that'll be a quick like 5 sentence explanation of it. And then your textbook might go a little bit deeper into it. Yeah. Is there anything else you kind of wanted to go over with this?
What I have for the reflection isn't really the reflection from this rubric. It's the that part is another one. It's a different that reflection I have there is a different reflection thingy. That one was so-called that 2-page thingy of reflection. It's not really that reflection that's like on that rubric. It's
so
another
yeah,
one.
as we just said, you know, like make sure that this reflection is based on this rubric. You know, like it should be like you can use stuff from this. I mean, I haven't read it, so I don't know. But if stuff in what you have here fits, great. But make sure that it's off of this rubric. Candidate reflects on the case study process and clearly identifies strong areas of his her learning and areas that need improvement in learning about assessing child's learning and development. So this reflection is about you, not about the child, about what you learn, about where you're strong, where you're not, where you want to grow. And yeah, really focusing on what you learn from it. So I see you kind of already have some of that in this reflection, but just really make sure. I see you have like question 1, 2, 3, 4. It doesn't sound like this is how it should be formatted for this reflection.
That one is for this one here.
Totally. And that's, you know, it was probably great for that one. But since this is a different assignment, it's going to have to be different. Does that make sense? Yeah. So this one's going to be more of a narrative form, and you got to tailor it to this assignment, even though you already did something similar.
Okay. Okay. So, my question is like, how many pages does this whole thing seem to be like? Because when I had like what I have right now, I wasn't really sure like how many pages, or I mean, like, I just have to make sure I've answered all the questions here on the rubric.
Yeah.
And then is
You're
it
just
mainly
looking for
just
like a guideline of like how let's see. So let's break this down. Let's go back up to the top and we'll kind of see, I'll kind of write notes in here and we'll like be like, okay, how much time do we think it'll take to cover that? And then we'll add it all up.
Yeah.
So introduction, I mean, that's going to be a page max. I would say half. The introduction doesn't sound too deep, so I would say half page to a page. Half page to a page. So 1 page. Or sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to write this. Intro, 0.5 to 1. Okay. Purpose. I would say 0.5 to 1 for that too. And then observations. Type of the data. Can it clearly and adequately describes the observation tools and approaches used? This one's kind of tricky because you are describing the different approaches and observation tools. So I would say this one probably, I'll just say straight a page for this one.
About a page?
Yeah, probably about a page, because you're going to talk about what you like were using to observe and how you did it. So like when you're talking about the notes you took, you're talking about like what you were looking for, what like how long you were watching, kind of just like this part is talking about what you did during the case study. You're going to just like go over all that stuff, what you did and why you did it. So I would say that's probably a page. And of course, as you said, these are just guidelines. So let's check on organization, analyses, and interpretation. That one, I would say that's probably, I would say 1.5 to 2 pages for that. Or I'll say 1 to 2 pages for that. But I would think 1 page might be a little light on that. I would say that would only be, I would say only if you went really into detail with the observations would I only do a page for that. But that seems like probably the most important part of the paper.
The fourth element?
Yeah. It seems like that's the most important part. All right, let's see what the next one is. Element 5. Okay, collaborating with parents. This one's tricky because, as we said, it was hard to collaborate with parents. So I would say this one, I would say is a page. But if you can't get a page, that makes sense. You know what I'm saying? Use of assessment data, I would say this is probably the second or just as important as element 4. I would say this one, I would say also 1.5 to 2 pages. Or we'll just say, yeah, I mean, it's going to be hard to describe specific activities and why you would use those activities in less than a page. So I'll say 1 to 2 pages again, though. If you're only doing 1 page, think about how you could maybe expand that. Reflection, I would also say is probably a page. Reflection, probably a page. So we're looking here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 6 to 9 pages, it looks like. I have here.
6 to 9?
Yeah. And let's say 7 to 9, because those 2 sections, it was like page would be a little light, and so 6 would probably not cover all this stuff quite well. So let's say 7 to 9 pages. I would say a max of 11. I wouldn't go over 11 pages. Then I would try to think about how to maybe narrow it down. But if you can't keep it under 11 pages, that's fine. But I would say 7 to 9 pages, double spaced, not too much, no space between paragraphs, like correctly formatted. 7 to 9 pages that sounds about right, since we added all that up.
For that so-called double spacing thing, would it be like that double space and then a space before a paragraph?
No space before a paragraph. So let me show you what a properly formatted one will look like. Why do I not have? I write so many papers. I don't know why I can't. My paper. This is weird. It's like it doesn't have all of the documents. All right, well, we'll look at it. So you'll have a title page. It's kind of echoing. Is there? Right? Do you have like 2 speakers going?
No.
Huh, weird. I wasn't doing that before. It's like, so yeah, no, these paragraphs.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, I think so. Yes.
Something I can help you with?
I think uh, so. What I have now is more for like the other reflection assignment, right? My reflections that I have in that paper right now.
Um, yeah, I mean, it is stuff.
Mhm.
So, but it's up,
Mhm.
more like, it's like if it's sound, but
Mhm.
it's the difference.
Okay. 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 Yeah. Okay then. Then I think I.
Here, I'm just gonna copy paste. I would copy paste that.
Okay, I got it. Yes.
All right, good luck. And then once you're done with this, the semester's over.
Yes. Thank you.
Of course. Good luck, Mandy. Have a
Yeah.
good summer break.
Yeah, and you wrote my my note.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to say that I'm fine. And we were on case study. Sound good?
Yes.
All right. Have a good one.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.
Uh, Here you finish this.